Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
You're not bored. You're undisciplined. You don't need novelty. You need devotion. Everyone's chasing something new, some shiny secret, some hidden shortcut that will save them from doing the same thing 1,000 times. But what they run from is the very thing that could change everything. Repetition, the brutal, dull, patient grind. That's where greatness lives. In the boredom, in the loop, in the quiet, thankless hours where nothing seems to change, but everything is changing. You just can't see it yet. The body's reconfiguring, the skill is refining, the mind is hardening. Most will never get far enough to witness that transformation. They'll quit before the pivot point. They'll call it stagnation when it was really incubation. True mastery is not a moment. It's a cycle, a rhythm, an obsession. And it is not exciting. It's the same punch thrown 10,000 times until it becomes instinct. It's the same sentence rewritten until the message bleeds like a vein. It's the same plan reviewed and reshaped until it bends the future. There is no spark of genius without the discipline of repetition. Talent is noise without structure. But when repetition enters the picture, the noise becomes music. The hands become instruments. The mind becomes a weapon. And the man becomes unstoppable. Everyone wants to be great. Few are willing to be redundant. But redundancy is the path. The greats do not fear repetition. They marry it. They welcome it as the crucible where skill is not just improved. It is born anew. With each repetition, they do not just repeat. They refine. They adjust the angle, sharpen the timing, clean the edges. The outsider sees sameness. The master sees layers. Like a sculptor removing invisible imperfections from stone, again and again until only excellence remains. There's a reason the mediocre crave variety. Because variety gives them an escape from responsibility. If they're always doing something new, they never have to confront the reality that they're bad at the thing they truly care about. They can hide behind novelty. They can say, "I'm just trying things." But mastery doesn't try. Mastery commits. Mastery digs a trench and says, "This is where I live now." The master is not looking for stimulation. He's looking for evolution. And that evolution only comes through unrelenting repetition. Consistency is not glamorous. That's why it's rare. The algorithm doesn't reward it. The crowd doesn't applaud it. But the results whisper to those who stayed. Repetition wears a disguise. It comes dressed as boredom, but it's the quiet assassin of mediocrity. It's the slow-burning fuel of legends. While others are distracted by trends, chasing the next technique, the master is drilling the same sequence over and over until there is no difference between movement and instinct. Think about the archer who draws the same bow daily, knowing that one day his arrow will cut through not just air, but time. Think about the dancer who rehearses the same motion, so that when the moment comes, her body moves without hesitation. Think about the writer who bleeds the same line onto the page until the words catch fire. Repetition is not practice. It is preparation for immortality. It is the sharpening of self, the commitment to become so good they can't ignore you, so precise they can't question you, so automatic you become myth. When you repeat, you break past the conscious. You dive beneath the mind's resistance, past the doubt, past the fatigue, past the distraction. Repetition silences the noise and creates flow. Real flow. Not the buzzword, the zone, where everything else disappears, where your hands move like memory, where time bends around your focus. That's what repetition buys you, sovereignty over yourself. And the price is high. It demands everything, but it gives you back tenfold what you were never going to find in shortcuts. Repetition exposes you. Every flaw, every weakness, every corner you tried to cut. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It reflects you back to yourself with ruthless clarity. And that's why it's feared. Because when you confront the same challenge every day, you can't run from the truth. You are either improving or pretending. That's why most avoid it. Because repetition demands honesty, and honesty breaks illusions. It forces you to see that your failure wasn't bad luck. It was lack of effort. That your plateaus weren't cosmic punishment. They were signs that you stopped digging. The man who repeats is the man who rises. Slowly, silently, without applause. And then suddenly, there he is, untouchable. Not because he was chosen, but because he chose to return to the practice even when it felt pointless. He chose to keep hammering the same nail when others were running to the next wall. He became so familiar with the process that he merged with it. And now, there is no separation between him and the thing he does. His art is not a skill. It is an extension of him. If you aren't tired when you go to bed and excited when you wake up, you are not living. You are waiting. Waiting for something to arrive, for purpose to fall from the sky, for meaning to announce itself at your doorstep. But it doesn't work that way. Fulfillment doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who build. If you're sleeping 8 hours and still waking up hollow, it's because you're underused. You've become a container with no contents. You go through the motions, tick the boxes, play the part, but the role is too small for your soul. You were not designed for comfort. You were designed for a burden that crushes lesser men but forges you. You need a meaningful project that requires your limits, that exhausts your focus, your courage, your willpower, your creativity. One that asks for your best and keeps asking until your best gets better. There is a reason you feel restless. Why no amount of distraction satisfies you? Why no weekend feels long enough and no break feels refreshing? It's because you are not depleted, you are dormant. Purpose is not about passion, it's about pressure. You need something that needs you. Not half of you, all of you. A project that stares back at you with teeth. One that demands clarity when you're clouded. One that forces growth when you want comfort. One that doesn't care how you feel, only how you execute. That's the difference between a hobby and a mission. The hobby adapts to you. The mission demands you adapt to it. Your energy was never meant to be spread thin. You were not made to dabble. You were not made to live in mild enthusiasm. The greats don't live like that. They fall asleep like corpses and wake up like soldiers. Because they have something to build. Something that eats at them. That chases them into every hour of the day. They don't need discipline to work. They need discipline to rest. You're not tired because of your work. You're tired because you're not working on what matters. A life without mission is a death without ceremony. And no, it doesn't have to be world-changing. It doesn't have to be revolutionary. It just has to be real. It has to challenge your edges, make your hands shake a little, force you to shut the door, silence your phone, confront your limitations. It could be writing a book, building a body, building a business, creating a system, finishing the thing you've been afraid to start. It's not about scale. It's about demand. the demand it places on you to become something more than you were yesterday, something more precise, more disciplined, more locked in, more alive. That kind of project doesn't just challenge your hours, it purifies them. You stop wasting time because time is now expensive. You stop saying yes to noise because clarity has become a necessity. You stop chasing dopamine because you've got purpose. And purpose is the rarest currency of all. It pays in silence, in peace, in that sharp, beautiful exhaustion that comes from living with force. You don't drift into bed anymore. You collapse. You don't drag yourself out of it either. You rise. Because there's something to be done. Something that matters. Something that isn't finished yet. And here's the truth you've avoided. You already know what it is. The project. The thing. The calling. It's been whispering to you for years. In the quiet moments. When the distractions fade. When your fake plans fall apart. That idea that won't leave you alone. That vision that keeps resurfacing. That path that feels like a cliff but looks like freedom. You've ignored it, avoided it, laughed it off. But it's still there, because it's not going away, because it is you, the part of you that refuses to die. You've been taught to wait for clarity, but clarity is not found. It is forged, in the doing, in the trying, in the failing. You want to feel alive again? Get in the fight. Start. Badly, if you must. Clumsily. Inconsistently. Just start. Because action is the first beat of momentum. And momentum is what reactivates the soul. That's how you crawl out of the numbness. That's how you break the apathy. That's how you earn the right to feel tired at night and wired in the morning. You don't need another productivity hack. You don't need a better morning routine. You need an enemy worth destroying, a dream worth bleeding for, a mountain worth climbing, even if no one sees you reach the top. And you need to commit to it like your life depends on it, because it does. There is no upgrade without a mission. There is no evolution without obsession. You don't just get better by existing. You get better by building. And when you do, repetition returns. The project demands it. The daily practice becomes sacred. The loop becomes holy. You begin to see that mastery was never about talent. It was about repetition. Repetition powered by purpose. That's the formula. That's the gate. That's what you were built for. The same thing every day for something that matters. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not scrolling, not listening, not performing, but alone in the silence of your own mind. No advice ringing in your ears. No eyes watching your movements. No pressure to act a certain way to remain acceptable to someone else's expectations. Most people have never tasted that solitude. Not really, they fear it. Because in that quiet, the mirrors appear. And in those mirrors, there are no filters. Just truth. The real kind. The uncomfortable kind. The kind that demands answers. When you're alone, you meet the version of you that's been buried beneath years of noise. That's where direction is found. But very few go there. And fewer still stay long enough to hear what that inner voice has been trying to say. You are not confused. You're just surrounded. Every opinion you've internalized is now competing with your own instincts. Your family had a vision for you. So did your teachers. So did the culture you grew up in. And now your mind is a courtroom, with all of them arguing their version of who you should be. And where are you in that argument? Silenced. Your own voice buried beneath what you think you should want. You become a collage of expectations, layered with fears that don't even belong to you. And that's why you're stuck. Because every time you try to move, you don't know if you're walking towards your truth or towards someone else's applause. Solitude strips that away. It doesn't give you clarity. It gives you the silence to find it yourself. It forces you to sit in discomfort, to confront the parts of you you've neglected, to ask questions that burn. Who am I without approval? What would I do if no one ever praised me for it? What would I build if I knew no one would see it? The answers are never clean. They're buried in pain, regret, and confusion. But they are yours. And that makes them holy. People think they're afraid of failure, but they're afraid of being alone with no one to blame. They don't want to step into solitude because it means stepping out of excuses. It means taking responsibility for every minute, every thought, every breath. When there's no audience, you can't perform. When there's no feedback, you can't outsource your value. When you're alone, the only person you're accountable to is the man in the mirror. And most men can't face him. So they run into noise, into work, into mindless consumption, anything to avoid that confrontation. But mastery demands solitude, the real kind, the kind that feels like exile, the kind that makes you question everything. Because that's where your voice gets louder. Not the voice you use in meetings, the voice you drowned in opinions. That voice remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. That voice still has the blueprint, and every time you ignore it, every time you chase noise instead of nuance, you fall further from it. Your comeback doesn't begin in a gym or on a stage. It begins in a room, alone, door closed. No distractions, just questions, and the courage to answer them. You've been told that connection is everything, that solitude is loneliness. But solitude is the birthplace of power. It is the training ground of those who lead. No general forged strategy in a crowd. No poet wrote truth in a stadium. No craftsman found mastery in noise. They all withdrew. They all retreated. Not to hide, but to remember. Because remembering is an act of war. In a world that's trying to make you forget yourself, solitude is rebellion. Solitude is sacred, and if you give it your full attention, it will give you back the parts of yourself you lost along the way. In solitude, repetition becomes different. It is no longer about efficiency. It is about integrity. Every motion repeated without spectators is a declaration. You're not doing it for claps. You're doing it because you said you would. That kind of repetition transforms men. It makes their word law, their effort holy, their discipline unshakable. Alone, the work becomes pure. It becomes personal. It becomes sacred. Because it's no longer about proving anything to anyone else. It's about becoming the man you once promised yourself you'd become. You're not lost. You're just unheard. Even by yourself. That's what solitude corrects. It retunes the frequency of your thoughts, so your real values rise to the surface. It clears the static of societal pressure. It silences the chorus of shoulds and shouldn'ts. It brings you home. And from that place, you choose. You don't chase. You don't conform. You choose. And that choice, repeated, becomes rhythm. That rhythm, refined, becomes identity. That identity, mastered, becomes legacy. But it starts with walking away from the voices, from the feed, from the performance. You don't need more noise. You need more inner dialogue. You need to stare out a window and remember. You need to sit with a blank page and bleed. You need to stop asking what's expected and start asking what's essential, because you already know. And if you don't act on that knowledge now, you'll be living someone else's life 10 years from now. Busy, impressive, and spiritually bankrupt. Burn the word iteration into your brain. Not as a concept, as a law. Nothing worth doing will rise fully formed from the void. There will be failure. And not poetic, romantic failure, but gut-wrenching, humiliating, sleep-depriving failure. You will create something and it will fall apart. You will speak and no one will listen. You will launch and no one will care. And in that moment you will be tempted to call it a sign that you're not good enough, a sign that this isn't for you. That's the trap. That's the test. Because the first version is never the one that wins. It's just the one that teaches. Your first idea, your first product, your first attempt, it's meant to fall short. But that doesn't make you a failure. That makes you a creator. You want genius? Start with garbage. Start with the version that embarrasses you. Let it fall apart. Let it get rejected. Let it mock you with its incompleteness. Because underneath that wreckage is the blueprint, the truth you couldn't have reached without touching the edge of embarrassment. Every genius idea you've ever admired started as something crude, awkward, almost laughable. But someone had the courage to keep sculpting, to iterate, to revise, to try again. That's the difference between the amateur and the master. The amateur stops after the first attempt. The master sees the first failure as an invitation. You don't find great ideas. You build toward them. Through failure, through ugly drafts, through awkward beginnings. You stumble into excellence by showing up again and again, regardless of how imperfect the last version was. You can't think your way into brilliance. You have to bleed your way into it. You have to execute without permission, without applause, without clarity. The fog lifts only after you've walked through it, not before. The man who hesitates for perfection dies with his best work inside him. The man who iterates unlocks it one brutal, messy version at a time. The world loves to call it luck. But luck is what happens when relentless iteration meets relentless execution. The guy who got lucky is usually the guy who tried 30 times, while you were still romanticizing your first attempt. He launched, while you were still refining. He failed forward while you were debating. He iterated out loud, while you were obsessing in silence. And now the world calls him gifted. But the gift was never talent. It was repetition. It was iteration disguised as failure. That's what most people refuse to learn. That the path to success is paved with discarded drafts, broken builds, awkward pitches, and countless do-overs. You've got to stop worshipping perfect. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start creating the bad versions faster. Start closing the gap between idea and execution. The moment you get an idea, test it, build it, ship it, share it. Let it break. Let it humiliate you. Let it show you where you're blind. Then build the next one. Sharper, clearer, closer to the target. You don't become great by planning greatness. You become great by out-executing your own hesitation. Over and over, until your bad versions become decent. Your decent versions become good, and your good versions start to look like genius. Most people don't fail because their idea was bad. They fail because they never moved past version 1. They mistook early rejection for final verdict. But iteration is rebellion against that lie. It's you saying, I will not die in the draft. It's saying, my final form will not be defined by my first failure. And when you live like that, ruthless with your process, patient with your craft, obsessive with your reps. You don't need to chase validation. You don't need permission to keep going. The process becomes the proof, and the world will catch up, eventually. Iteration requires ego death. It means you must let go of your need to be right, to be praised, to be seen as a natural. You must embrace the identity of a builder, of a maker, of someone so committed to the final version that they're willing to be wrong 100 times to get there. That's power. That's rare. And that's the only path to mastery. Everyone else is too busy trying to protect their pride. But you're here to finish, to refine, to repeat until reality bends. Iteration turns pain into precision. It transforms mistakes into methods. It takes the chaos of creation and shapes it into something with teeth. When you commit to iteration, you stop fearing failure. You stop taking feedback personally. You start seeing your work as clay, meant to be molded, meant to be reshaped, meant to go through fire until it holds form. You become lethal, because you are no longer romanticizing the first version. You are married to the final form, and you know exactly what it takes to get there.